Let's get this gorgeous solar system design underway. So here we've got two ways that you can do this. You can do an outline of the stitch and then you can copy or stitch over the design that's inside, or you can do what I'm going to show you here, which is do a full thick circle in a chain stitch, and then you can add some detail over top to do your planet. So I'm going to show you here with the sun. We're going to start with the center. So we've got our circle, which is the same shape as our planet, but then I'm just going to show you how we do our sun design on the outside as well. So let's get started with this. So let's go ahead and place our sun sticker onto our garment where we want it, and make sure it's sticking nice and firmly to our knitwear. Now first I'm going to show you how we're going to fill in this circle part, because this is what you're going to use for all of your planets. So I'm just going to pop on a good arm's length full of the yarn colour. Now I am going to turn this into a sunshine, so obviously I'm going to do this in a yellow, but we're just going to bring up from any point you can start at for this. We're just going to pull our needle through, and we're just going to leave a small tail at the end, which we're going to tie off to when we are finished. So the stitch we're going to use here is the chain stitch. So you see my needle is going back down through the hole that we just came up from, and then we're going to leave a space of about 1/2 centimetre. Now make sure our yarn is behind our needle at all times, and we're just going to push that needle through, and you'll see now that we will create a first chain. We're then going to take our needle back down through that chain we just created and do the same process again. So if you want to keep your yarn to the left, that makes it a lot easier. And we're just going to bring our needle, obviously that yarn is now behind the needle. We're just going to bring that needle up and pull it through again to create a second chain. And we're just going to continue like this all the way around until we come to our very first chain again. And once we're here, we're just going to take the opposite end of our needle and thread it through our very first chain. Pull all the yarn through, and then we're just going to anchor down into our last chain, and you'll see now that we've created this beautiful perfect circle. And now we're not going to be tying off here because we've got plenty of yarn left on our needle to go and do another row. So I'm going to bring my needle up from a starting point, and we're going to get nice and close to our previous circle so that we're going to use that as a guideline to go around. And we're just going to continue like this with our chain stitch again until we come to our very first chain once again. And once we're here again, using the opposite end of the needle, we're just going to thread through that first chain, and we're just going to anchor back down into our last chain. Now we still have plenty of yarn left on our needle, so we're going to go one more time, and we're just going to repeat this process once more. And now we're here, we're just going to anchor that one down. Now you see we've still got a little bit of a gap in the middle. I reckon we can get one more chain in there, still got enough yarn to complete this. So I'm just going to pop one last chain into this space to complete this circle. And once we finish that, we can flip our garment over. You'll see we've got our starting tail and our threaded needle. We're just going to thread that through all of our work so that these two tails are now together. And once they're together, we can tie them together in a triple knot. And now you'll see we've got our base for our planet. Now you can leave your planets just in one bold colour, that would be absolutely fine, or you can actually stitch on top of your stitching. So for example, if you were going to do an earth, you'd do your base as blue, and then you could thread on some green yarn and then just do some little green sections, which would help show that it was the earth. Or you can of course just thread on some yarn and just do it in a different color by adding some little dashes or some little squiggly lines just to give it that sort of solar system look. So I'm just showing you here how you can actually stitch on top of your stitching. This is really creative freedom. You can do pretty much anything you want here. You can, of course, not fill in the full circle and just follow the outline and then add a little bit of squiggles in the middle. It's entirely up to you. This is a really fun creative project. So you can see you can actually stitch on top. I'm just going to undo all this now because we're actually going to be doing a sunshine here. So let's just take that yarn out. So we're just going to finish up our sunshine here, and to do that I'm just going to thread back on some yellow yarn, and we probably need about a good arm's pull of that. And we're just going to go in and do a straight stitch. So you've got these markings here. If we just follow those all the way around, making sure to leave a tail underneath to tie off to. So we're just going to do a simple straight stitch and then just move on to the next one, all the way around the outside of the sunshine. And once we get here, we've got our two tails together. We can tie them together in a triple knot and snip away any excess ends, and you are done with your sunshine. Now to create our moon look, we're going to thread on a good armful of the grey yarn, or any colour you want to do your moon, and we are just going to do a chain stitch here, which I just wanted to show you how we keep our corners nice and pointy. So we're just going to leave a tail at the end here, and we're just going to go in with our chain stitch as usual. So we're going to bring our needle back into the hole we just came up from, leaving about a ½ centimetre space. Make sure that our yarn goes behind the needle, and then we're just going to pull through to create that first chain. And we're just going to continue with our chain stitch all the way until we get to the first bottom point. So I'm just going to anchor that down now with a stitch, and I'm just going to bring my needle about 1 or 2 millimeters underneath where I just anchored down. And I'm just going to continue with my chain stitch all the way to the top point again. So doing it this way, we allow ourselves to keep that pointy tip on the moon. So otherwise, if we kept going with a continuous stitch, it would have a really rounded look, which just doesn't give that nice moon effect. And once we get to the top, we're just going to anchor that down again with a stitch. Now we don't need to do any tying off here. We've got plenty of yarn left on our needle to continue filling inside the moon with the chain stitch. And once we get to the end, we're just going to anchor that down. And when we flip over, you'll see we've got two tails now. They're a little bit away from each other, so we're just going to track underneath our work to bring those two tails now nicely together, which we can tie off in a triple knot. Now for our star, you've got a fabric marker in your kit. I would advise doing this little shape so that it will keep you on track. And we're just going to follow these guidelines here. I won't try and explain it. I think a visual is probably more helpful. Once you memorize the sequence, it makes making stars very, very simple. But if you follow this little guide here, I would say you would use 3 rows in total. Don't go too wide or any wider than 3 rows. Otherwise you will make your star too baggy, and you don't want to have really long straight stitches because they will get really baggy, and that's not really a good look. So yeah, just memorize this little sequence and you'll be fine. It's actually really easy once you remember it. And then once you've finished your star, you're just going to take your needle and track back through your work on the underside and tie those two little ends together in a triple knot. Now I'm just going to show you very quickly also how to do a distant star. So we're just going to do a French knot for this. If you haven't tried this before, it can be a little bit tricky, but keep practicing. We're going to create this C shape with our yarn. We're going to wrap it around 3 times, and then we're just going to hold that in our right hand. And then we're going to take our needle to the row above, so the stitch above. So we're not going down the same hole. We're going to give it a bit of tension on the bottom piece of yarn and push through, and you create this beautiful little French knot. Just tie off together in a triple knot on the underside and scatter it around your jumper. It'll look super, super sweet. I do have a more detailed tutorial for that if you find it a little bit tricky. And those are the stitches that you're going to need to learn to create this gorgeous space sweater. I really hope you enjoy this project. Happy stitching, guys.